Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and time for another Valentine's Day card. So I'm starting off with some Simon Says 120 pound white cardstock, and I'm using the largest rectangle die from their basic rectangle set, as well as the Lucky to Know You wafer die. So I got those lined up on the cardstock, and then I'm running them through my Big Shot, and got the trim off with the large rectangle die. And then I want to carefully remove the Lucky to Know You die because I wanted to keep it in place so I can do all my sponging. So made sure to get the middle of the Y there back into place. And then I'm just going to use some press and seal to hold all of this in place so that the interiors and parts of the letters aren't going to come popping out when I sponge on all the colors. So press on that press and seal, and then I'm just going to flip it over. And then I've got all my cardstock with all those die cut letters and the insides all in place. And then I super sped up this part of the video, and I'm just using different shades of distress ink to do basically like an ombre blend on the cardstock. So I started off with my lightest, which was Tumbled Glass, and just sponged that onto the cardstock. And then I'm going on with Broken China and really sponging that on. And then I'm going to go on with Salty Ocean, and then finally Blueprint Sketch. And I'm really loving the Simon Says 120 pound cardstock lately. It is so smooth. I really like how colors, like distress inks especially, blend on this cardstock. It just goes on so nicely. So I used a sticky note as well at one point to keep my fingers from touching the cardstock, because the oils from your hands can sometimes show marks, like even fingerprints. So once I was done with all the blending, I grabbed my distress sprayer and sprayed that on there, let it sit for like 30 seconds to a minute, and then picked up the water with a paper towel. So I've got the fun little splatter effect. And I quickly just took my heat tool to dry this a bit. And then I pulled out just the words themselves. I wanted to leave all the interior pieces in place. In the end, when this card was done, I don't know if that was necessary or not, like if it really made a big of a difference, but for what I had planned in my head, I wanted to try it. So I made sure to pop out all of the letters and then press the centers back onto that press and seal. That's where the press and seal comes in really handy. Post-it tape would work too if you don't have press and seal, but this is just convenient. So popped out all of these letters, and I kind of used my craft pick and whatnot and like bent the cardstock a tiny little bit, or like, you know, moved it around just to get it to get these letters out and keep the centers in. So once I've got the letters popped out, the centers back where they belong, I'm then going to use the Drawn Hearts stencil from Simon Says Stamp. And that's a nice thing too about the press and seal is that's why I left like the extra like excess hanging over the edges, because that holds the stencil in place, so I didn't need to tape it down. So press the stencil into place, and then I'm just applying some embossing paste over it with my palette knife and just trying to scrape it as gently as possible. I want just a really thin, even coat across the entire piece of cardstock. And once that was done, I quickly scraped the excess back into the container, put the lid on the container, cleaned up my tools, because embossing paste, once it's dry, you know, it'll wreck your stencil, your tools, everything if you don't remove it, or it's a major pain to remove. So I scraped it all, put the lid back on my container, wiped off the palette knife with a baby wipe, and then the stencil, I just take to the sink and run it under water because it cleans up really, really easily. So once I was done with that, the actual piece of cardstock here, I gently peeled it off the press and seal, and then I just ran my fingers along the edges where any of the embossing paste was kind of hanging over, because I didn't want it to leave any of those like bumpy, sharp edges. So I just pressed my finger, and then I used the craft pick again to go in between all these letters where there was any little blobs of embossing paste, you know, because that would make it a little bit difficult to reapply the letters later on. So I just went through there, wiped off any of those little blobs so it was cleaned out. And then all those little interior pieces that have, you know, they've got some blobs of embossing paste, I just didn't worry about that because I'm like, I'll deal with that when it's dry. It's not a big deal because they're such small pieces. So I set all that aside to dry, and then I die cut the Lucky to Know You words about 3 or 4 more times from some white cardstock. And then I stacked those all together with my multi-medium matte adhesive. So I ended up doing, well, I did 3 layers of the white, and then I adhered the final layer that had all the sponged color on it on top. So I just applied a thin layer of the multimedia matte adhesive from Ranger, and then I'm going to press on the top layer, which is the sponged color that I had done earlier. So I ended up with 4 layers thick of cardstock. Normally I only do 3. I think that gives enough dimension, but this time I did 4 because I was planning on inlaying this back into the card. So then for the card base itself, I'm using just one of Simon Says pre-scored note cards. The 100 of the same cardstock is 120 pounds. Just like a nice little convenience thing. I rarely do side fold cards, but this one, because it was a pre-made card, it just made sense. I applied a ton of adhesive. I used my ATG and like was very liberal with the adhesive because I wanted to adhere this right to the card, plus fill in all the spaces to make it easier to adhere the words and all the centers. So got that onto the card front, adhered my main panel here first, right flat to the card base. And then this made it so much easier to quickly inlay all these letters. I didn't have to apply the multimedia matte and sit around and fiddle and all that kind of stuff. I could just press these into place. So it was really quick and easy. So got all my letters and words in place first. And then I'm going to go in and adhere all of the centers. So most of them, like the larger pieces, were pretty easy to just pick up and pop into place. I just scraped off any little bits of the embossing paste that maybe had hung over those edges so that they would fit right in there. And then for some of it, I'd use a craft pick. I also use my little crystal katana because there's some really tiny little parts like of the O and the K and whatnot. So got those all into place. And then I also used my reverse tweezers for the tiniest little pieces just to get those inlaid back into the letters. So it took a little bit of fiddling, but I think it was worth it in the end just to create kind of a cool effect. So peeled everything off, removed any of the excess embossing paste and whatnot, got that off of there, and then just pressed those right back into the center of all the letters. So I was going to leave the card just as is. Like I just liked how the blues and the embossing paste and everything looked. But I thought it would look really nice with like a bit of a pop of red. So I pulled out the mini hearts outline dies from Simon Says and die cut some lipstick red cardstock from that. So it cuts out all these outlines, but it also cuts out some the interior heart shape as well. So I laid out a few of those on my card front and was happy kind of with how those looked. So once I was happy with that, I used my tweezers again just to hold the outlines because they're so small and finicky. So I just held them with my tweezers and then applied a little bit of the multimedia matte to the back of these and then just adhered them right onto the card front and press that down. That's where the multimedia matte is so handy because something so fine and delicate like this, if any adhesive, which more than likely will ooze out a tiny little bit, it's going to dry matte. You're not going to see it. You're not going to have any sticky, gloopy little bits. I highly recommend this adhesive. Like, this is one of those things that just every crafter should own, in my opinion. So applied those little hearts, and then for the inside of the card, I went along and used the Love and Quotes stamp set. I absolutely love this heart sentiment. I love it. So I pulled that out and put it on my block, and then I just used all those same distressings to ink it up, and I just went from lightest to darkest again. Just applied the tumbled glass, and then like put on some of the broken china, and then dabbed on a bit of the salty ocean, and then finally dabbed on a bit of the blueprint sketch. So it's just a multicolored sentiment on the inside of the card. So once that was stamped, I still had all those little die cuts left over. So I grabbed about 3 of the different little outline hearts as well and just adhere those into place with the same multi-medium matte adhesive. So just tiny little dabs of that on different parts of the heart. And then my reverse tweezers again to get those pressed into place. And then that's going to finish off the inside of the card. And I thought I was done, but then when I was looking at the card after finishing off the inside, I was like, oh, I wanted to add just a couple more hearts just to finish it off. And plus I just liked how they looked against the blue. It just really made them pop. So I grabbed a few of the solid hearts and laid those out, and I was happy with how that looked. So decided to adhere those into place, and that finally finished off my card. So as always, there will be links below the video to my blog post with links to all the supplies used in the description box right below the video. So you can click on that to expand if you're interested in finding all the different supplies, as well as my blog post will have the pictures posted, picture links, all that kind of stuff. So definitely check that out if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, thumbs upping, and commenting on my videos. I really, really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.